Welcome to TV, Tennessee Valley Church. Not long ago, I performed a wedding ceremony near Cleveland, Tennessee. I realized I was not far from the small town of Dayton, Tennessee. 99 years ago, in July 1925, America's radios were tuned in to a courtroom in Dayton. It was the first trial ever broadcast on radio. In that courtroom, they were holding the so-called monkey trial. John T. Scopes, a public school teacher, was being prosecuted. The charge was teaching evolution in a public school, thus violating a Tennessee law that banned such teaching. William Jennings Bryan, a staunch conservative and perennially unsuccessful presidential candidate, was the prosecuting attorney. Clarence Darrow, a slick, famous trial lawyer, defended Mr. Scopes. Scopes was convicted of teaching evolution and was fined, for he was indeed in violation of school policy. Later, however, the verdict was overturned. In 1925, many people of biblical faith were highly suspicious of people of science. Scientists were seen as elitists. People of biblical faith were concerned about what their kids were being taught in public schools. And in 1925, many people of science perceived people of biblical faith as naive and combative, even backward and bumpkin-esque. 99 years later, and some are still struggling with either biblical faith or science. We've come a long way, but there's still tension and distrust, at least on the part of some, between biblical faith and natural sciences. This is an important topic in Huntsville. This city and region has been shaped by science. Obviously, the science of space is the most notable. Many of you have been members of the team of space scientists, from the race to the moon to the dream of Mars, from the space shuttle to the space station, from the Hubble telescope to the Webb telescope. But it's not just space science around us. It's all kinds of science. From the Hudson Alpha Institute for Biotechnology to the Intuitive Planetarium on the campus of the Space and Rocket Center. From the agricultural and biological scientists at Alabama A&M to the environmental and earth scientists at the University of Alabama at Huntsville. From Huntsville's world-class robotics teams to the Alabama Science Festival. From the Museum of Natural Science over in Decatur to the Alabama School for Cyber Technology and Engineering in Huntsville. Science is all around us, and so we must talk about biblical faith and natural science. A quick explanation. I'm saying biblical faith and not religion. Religion is a really broad term. I'm talking here about those who embrace as divine revelation the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. I'm saying natural science because science covers a vast array of disciplines, from computers to psychology. Natural science is the science of our physical world. It includes disciplines such as physics, chemistry, biology, astronomy, and genetics. Natural science focuses on observable, verifiable evidence and physical laws. So let's dig into the relationship of biblical faith and natural sciences. Both those who love science and those who love the Bible, and sometimes those are the same people, by the way, should remember that, to quote from 1 Corinthians 13, we all see through a glass darkly. Neither people of biblical faith nor people of science have the final word on lots of things. Let's start with science. There are lots of things for which science does not have the final word. For example, while Carrie and I were in Belfast, Ireland recently, we visited the site where the Titanic was built and from which it was launched. There I found the replica of a headline from a Belfast newspaper in 1911, the year of the construction of Titanic and her sister ships, Olympic and Britannic. The headline read, "The vessels mark a new epoch in naval architecture. In science, construction, and equipment, they represent the last word in this science." The last word in this science, the article said, A few months later, of course, the Titanic sank to the floor of the Atlantic. The Titanic was not the last word in the science of shipbuilding. Science never utters the last word. We continue to learn. John Christie, a member of our church who holds a PhD in climatology and is the state climatologist, told me, "My physics teacher said we should always begin our scientific pronouncements with, at our present level of ignorance, we think we know the following." Scientific discoveries and understandings are ongoing. But it's not just science that doesn't have the last word. There are lots of things for which biblical faith does not have the final word either. Dr. Noby Stone is a local scientist whose works I've read and who's become a friend. He's a deeply devoted follower of Jesus. Dr. Stone wrote, "God's revelation through His inspired word can never be changed, but there is much room for improvement of our understanding of His revelation." Deuteronomy 29:29 reads, "The secret things belong to God." There are mysteries that people of faith will not solve this side of heaven. The Bible does not have answers to every question you and I might ask, such as, what happened to the dinosaurs? I saw Jurassic Park, so I know we had them. Where'd they go? Or, what exactly was that star over Bethlehem? Or, why are some people, really good people, more susceptible to certain diseases? Let's be honest. Both theology and science attempt to comprehend the incomprehensible. And since neither biblical faith nor natural science have solved all the mysteries, we can learn from each other. As long as none of us is so arrogant as to think we have all the information we need. Alistair McGrath wrote, "Neither science nor religion can provide a total account of reality. Science does not answer every question that we might have about the world. Neither does religion. Yet, taken together, these can offer us a stereoscopic view of reality denied to those who limit themselves to only one discipline's perspective." We don't have to choose between biblical faith and science. Now, of course, when a scientific theory obviously conflicts with the Bible, I choose the Bible. And frankly, there are many scientists who are staunch atheists. For some scientists, faith is childish and indefensible. So, if someone says, science proves there is no God and our universe began by mere chance, well, such an overstatement has to be disregarded by people of biblical faith. However, not all scientists are anti-religion. Many people of science are not dismissive of biblical faith. And we don't have to choose between science and faith. When it comes to science and biblical faith, it's both and, not either or. Baptist pastor and professor Blake McKinney says, "Don't assume you must choose between science and faith, between being a thinker and being a believer." He goes on, "If you're a Christian, please don't check your brain in the church foyer. And if you're a scientist, please don't leave your faith outside the science lab. We really can be both and instead of either or." Sisters, that's how Dr. Werner von Braun liked to describe the relationship. Sisters. Science and religion are not antagonists, he wrote on a number of occasions. On the contrary, they are sisters. Sisters with a complicated relationship, to be sure, but sisters nonetheless. We don't have to choose between the Bible's teachings and scientific claims. There are complementary commonalities between the two. Science and religion give us different ways of looking at our world. I love the way the late Mary Midgley, a British philosopher, described the roles of biblical faith and natural sciences. She suggested we consider two different kinds of maps. The first kind of map notes boundaries. Picture a map of the United States with each state clearly defined. That's called a political map. You can look at the map and see the boundaries of states, maybe even cities. We know what different states look like because we've seen them on political maps. But there's another kind of map, a topographical map. A topographical map doesn't show the boundaries of states. That's not the intent of a topographical map. That map simply shows the contours of the land. It shows the mountains and the valleys, the forests and the deserts. However, if we overlay the two, we get a more complete picture of our world. We can see both the boundaries of states and the mountains and valleys, forests and deserts. Mary Midgley suggested we think of religion and science as differing but complementary maps of reality. The political and topographical maps have different purposes, but each leaves us with unanswered questions. Together, again, they give us a more complete picture of our world and our life in it. So, I would appeal to both people of biblical faith and people of natural science. Could we agree? Could we agree that when overlaid, faith and science offer us complementary depictions of reality? Could we agree that together they give us a more complete picture of our world and our life in it? Could we agree that the Bible does not hold the answer to every conceivable question? Could we agree there are ways in which faith can help scientists with their tasks, as in, for example, medical ethics? Could we agree that some of our technologies are outpacing our ability to understand the moral implications of those technologies? Could we agree that science can help us understand the revelation of God in Scripture? After all, Scripture was written originally to people whose understanding of science was rather rudimentary and simple, so the Bible doesn't address our scientific questions. Could we agree that blanket statements such as "there is no God" are unverifiable and thus are unscientific? Could we agree that such a claim cannot be proved and is thus an overreach? Could we agree that churches are driving young adults away from faith when we tell them that their Bibles and their biology books are necessarily incompatible? Could we consider such complexities as the human eye and our expansive and expanding universe and consider how unlikely it really is that all this came from nothing? Could we agree that the reality of a Creator at least seems reasonable? Maybe an agreement on those rather simple things could enhance the relationship between biblical faith and natural sciences. Now, I want you to meet my friend, Dr. Neil Lamb. Dr. Lamb is the president of the marvelous and world-class Hudson Alpha Institute for Biotechnology. Lisa Greer is going to talk with Dr. Lamb about this relationship of biblical faith and natural sciences. Then, after the interview and some wonderful music, I'll be back to tell you my favorite story about one of the world's great scientists.
Hudson Alpha is one of the crown jewels of Huntsville and the whole Tennessee Valley. President Dr. Neil Lamb joins us today. Appreciate you being here, Dr. Lamb.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
What is the latest and greatest research going on at Hudson Alpha?
That's a little bit like being asked to decide which of your children is your favorite, because there are so many different things happening at Hudson Alpha. But one of the things that I'm really excited about right now is some of our work taking place in neurodegenerative disease, things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS. We are trying to uncover the genetic switches that lead to the development of these different neurodegenerative disorders, and if we can uncover the causes, we can begin to think about ways that we provide earlier, better treatments, or even ways that we slow the progression or prevent it entirely.
I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in the outcome of that research.
Yes, most definitely.
You are a scientist and a person of faith. Do you ever find that the two conflict?
I think science and faith are different ways of knowing and understanding the world around us. They utilize different sources to arrive at truth. Science helps us understand the natural world through observation and question and testing. It lets us get a sense of the function of the world. Faith asks questions about our relationship with a higher power, with God, and moral behavior and how we think about the afterlife. They both point to truth, but they come at that from different ways. And in my own life, science and faith really work complementary. One enriches my appreciation and understanding of the other. So my scientific understanding helps me appreciate the beauty of a flower, or the changing of the seasons, the complexity of space travel, or the amazing way that our DNA links with the environment around us to create unique beings like you and me. So it's very much that those two go hand in hand. At the same time, I've had enough experiences in my life that cannot be explained in a scientific way that my mental bookshelf leaves room for miracles and divine intervention right alongside the laws of biology, chemistry, and physics. My faith also provides a moral grounding for me as I think about the way we apply scientific technologies and how we make sure that all people benefit from science and not just a small group of people that are privileged by class or power or access. I will say I do recognize that sometimes science and biblical faith do have a tension between them. I think that's the exception rather than the rule. But a great example is the origin of humans. How do we reconcile the opening chapters of Genesis with all the scientific evidence around evolution? That may feel like a very black and white issue, but the reality is there's a lot of gray there, and there's a lot of space for common ground. In my own belief, I believe in a creator God whose act of creating was the process of evolution. Not everybody will agree with me on that, but I think that actually probably bothers us much more than it bothers God.
And Dr. Lamb, what advice would you have to Christ followers who live in a scientific city like Huntsville?
First, I think I would affirm the goodness of the work that we do. Psalm 19, verse 1 says, "The heavens declare the glory of God's handiwork." The universe, the natural world around us, is meant to be discovered. And I think God is pleased when we use our minds and our abilities to explore and understand this world and to make applications of that. So I think the doing of the science work, the technology work happening here in the area is something that God smiles on. Secondly, Huntsville, Madison County, this area is blessed with one of the highest concentrations of science and technology people in the country. And I think that we should be proud of that. I also think we should take a pretty healthy dose of humility along with that and recognize that while we know a lot of things, we do not know everything, nor do we have the answer to everything. And knowing all that information doesn't make us any better, any more godly, any closer to God than anybody else. So I think there's a careful of being prideful of the field of science and our knowledge. I also think that we have a responsibility to use that in the best way possible. Luke says, "To whom much is given, much is required." And we need to use the gifts, the resources, our knowledge to make the world a better place, a healthier place, a safer place, a more just place. And that also means that sometimes we step out of our labs and into places of service, working with the least, last, and the lost. I think that that's what Jesus means when he talks about the kingdom of heaven has now come on earth. So I'm grateful to live in a community like Huntsville. I love all of the science and technology and the incredibly smart people. I take that as an action plan for me to now put my faith into action, into service, and into working to really make the world better.
Dr. Lamb, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your heart.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mounts I'm fixed upon it, mounts of God's unchanging love. like a fetter, bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts above. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts above.
I want to tell you my favorite story about one of history's greatest scientists. He was born in a country other than our own into a Lutheran family. He was confirmed in the Lutheran Church at age 13. Faith in his early years, though, appears to have been a nominal faith with little serious attention paid to spirituality in his youth. According to a friend from his university days, he was a religious skeptic, bordering on being an atheist. When he moved to the U.S., he was, in his own words, skeptical of the need for any organized religion. A pivotal event came within a few months of his relocation to the U.S., out in the country, outside of Fort Bliss, Texas. This scientist accepted an invitation to a worship service. He described the experience to the editor of Guideposts magazine years later. A neighbor asked the scientist to go to church with him. The scientist agreed because, in his words, I wanted to see if the American church was just a country club as I'd been led to expect. Upon arrival at the church site near El Paso, the skeptical guest seemed surprised to see a small white frame building on a browned grass lot. The scientist found the members of that congregation to be unpretentious and earnest. The worship service had not yet started. The few folks who'd gathered were awaiting the arrival of the church bus. Eventually, an old, battered bus pulled up. 50 or so people piled off. Last came the bus driver, who also was the pastor. The scientist was impressed. He later wrote about the vibrancy and the sincerity of these people, about the richness of their fellowship, about how these people of modest means were raising money and giving sacrificially to build a Sunday school wing for their little church. The scientist wrote, "This was the first time I ever understood that religion was not a cathedral inherited from the past or a quick prayer at the last minute." This marked a new beginning for the scientist, a spiritual conversion, what has been described as nothing less than his new birth. His spiritual growth soon would be evident in his writings and speeches. I'm talking about Dr. Wernher von Braun. Michael Neufeld, who is known for painting a comprehensive and often uncomplimentary picture of the scientist, conceded von Braun's conversion to a more than nominal Christianity. Neufeld noted that von Braun became a devout Christian. Something profound changed for von Braun in that little country church in West Texas. As a person of biblical faith and natural sciences, von Braun understood the value of both. His conversion to faith in Jesus did not diminish his passion for science. In fact, it might even have enhanced that passion. Von Braun understood the complementary roles of biblical faith and natural science. Perhaps we in the Tennessee Valley can too.
Hi everyone, I'm Holly Knupp, Minister to Median Adults at First Baptist Huntsville. We are folks in our 40s and 50s, married, single, and empty nesters. We'd like to invite you to any of our in-person studies, small groups, or social events. We look forward to building community and growing our faith together with you.